English made easy. Hey guys! Bored of those vocab lists? Me too. At 1 Degree North Companion, we're turning wordly wise into an adventure to make learning actually interesting. Let's jump in.
All right, today we are heading deep into the Alaskan wilderness. We're going to explore an incredible story of survival, of a team forged in ice, and of one woman who completely redefined what it means to endure. This is the story of Susan Butcher and her ultimate test of spirit.
1,157 miles. Just let that number sink in. That's the distance from Anchorage to Nome, Alaska, a journey that pushes you to the absolute razor's edge of survival. And it's a trek you simply can't do alone. It demands a team, one built on a foundation of unwavering, absolute trust.
So, what does it really take to cross a frozen world like that? I mean, it's a question that gets right to the heart of both the human and the animal spirit. It's not just about being strong, it's about grit, it's about connection, and it's about a will that just refuses to be broken by the ice.
And this right here is the ultimate stage for that test, the Iditarod Trail Sled Dog Race. This whole event unfolds over these desolate, lonely landscapes where, honestly, the only sounds are the wind, your own breathing, and the sound of your dog's paws on the snow.
You know, to really get what racers like the legend Susan Butcher went through, you have to understand the brutal reality of that trail. And the words used to describe it, they aren't just words. They are literally the language of survival up in the far north.
So first up, just try to imagine an experience so grueling it pushes you way beyond exhaustion. This is not your average marathon, not by a long shot. We're talking up to 2 weeks of relentless physical and mental punishment, with almost no sleep. It's a challenge so difficult, so exhausting, the word grueling really barely does it justice.
And on top of that, you have to deal with some truly adverse conditions. In the Iditarod, that means facing unfavorable, often just plain hostile weather. I'm talking winds that can hit 140 miles an hour and temperatures that can fluctuate wildly, from 40 degrees above zero to 50 degrees below. Out here, nature isn't just an obstacle, it's an active opponent.
And to survive all of that, you and your team have to be unbelievably robust. That goes for everybody, the musher and every single dog. We're talking about a deep, vigorous, powerhouse level of strength just to withstand the daily punishment of the trail. Now, these challenges sound immense on paper, but what do they actually look like out on the trail? Let's dive into 2 specific moments from Susan Butcher's career that show you what facing these elements truly means.
So, picture this. It's the 1984 race. The trail ahead, the path you've trained for, has literally been blown away by the wind. The snow is just gone, leaving nothing but this frozen, totally impassable ground.
Meanwhile, the temperatures have absolutely plummeted to 50 degrees below zero. In this kind of cold, any exposed skin freezes in minutes. Your survival is measured in seconds.
Her only alternative route is to take her entire team out onto the frozen surface of the ocean. Think about that choice. It's a terrifying gamble between a definite dead end and an unknown, incredibly dangerous path.
And then, the worst happens. The ice gives way. She and her entire team plunge right through into the frigid Arctic water. Honestly, it was only because of her incredible lead dog, Granite, that they managed to scramble their way back to shore and somehow keep going.
And just 1 year later, she faced a completely different kind of terror. A starving moose, seeing her dogs as a threat, charged the team. For what must have felt like an absolute eternity, Susan physically fought this enraged animal with an axe to save her dogs. The brutal attack only ended when another musher showed up and was forced to dispatch the moose. The cost, though, was just immense. 2 of her beloved dogs were killed, 13 others were badly mauled, and she had no choice but to drop out of the race.
These events are just harrowing, but they also reveal something much deeper about the woman who faced them. To really understand her success, you have to understand her pretty unique personality.
Okay, so this is where her story gets really fascinating. Around people, Susan Butcher was often described as aloof, remote, even distant. But with her dogs, she was the complete opposite. She believed that the deep, trusting bond she built with them wasn't just part of the race, it was the absolute secret to her success. People who knew her said she was more at ease with her dogs than she was with people. Her world, her comfort zone, her most important relationships, they were all with her animals. And this wasn't just some professional strategy. This was who she was, deep down.
And that's exactly why this picture is so powerful. We're not just looking at a team of highly trained canine athletes here. No, we're looking at a family. Every single dog was a pet, raised right in her home, with the run of the place. That was the bond. That was what carried them across the finish line, time and time again. And it was that incredible bond that led to an absolutely legendary career, cementing her place in the history of sports forever. Get this, after the heart-wrenching setbacks of '84 and '85, she didn't just come back, she dominated. She won for 3 years in a row. And then her fourth victory in 1990, that came during the most adverse weather the race had ever seen. What a testament to her skill and her resilience. You know, it all really comes down to one single word: endurance. For Susan Butcher, the Iditarod wasn't just another race. She called it the ultimate test of endurance, the ability to put up with just incredible hardship. And that was true for both the animals and the humans who dared to run it. But her story teaches us something really important. Endurance isn't just about bearing physical hardship. It's the endurance of that bond between a musher and her dog. It's the endurance of a spirit that falls into freezing water and still gets back on the sled. It's a spirit that faces down a moose and comes back to win the very next year.
So, let me ask you this. If you were to participate in this ultimate test of endurance, how would you describe your canine team with distinction? What would make them stand out as the most robust team on the ice? And of course, the most important question, what would you name that one lead dog, that Granite, who you would trust with your life?
Hope you guys enjoyed that last lesson. If you did, smash that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell. Ready for more? The next one starts right now.
Today, we're going to tell a story. It's a story about how we, all of us, woke up to our relationship with the earth. It's about a promise, a kind of pact we'll call the Awakening Covenant. And this story, well, it doesn't begin with a whisper. It begins with a choke. I want you to imagine looking up at the sky over Los Angeles in the 1960s and seeing this. And, this wasn't even the first time. Way back in 1943, a smog rolled in that was so thick, so strange, that people panicked. They actually thought it was a chemical attack from Japan. But by the 60s, this toxic soup of smoke and fog was just a part of daily life. The very air had become dangerous. Now, for a lot of people, this wasn't just bad weather anymore. It felt like something else, a warning, a really chilling preview of what was ahead. So they started to ask the question, was this an omen? Was this what the future of the entire planet looked like if we didn't do something? Right, so an omen is just a sign, something that points to what's coming. And those smoggy skies, that was a pretty unmistakable one. It was a glimpse into a world that we were literally creating, a world being poisoned by its own idea of progress. So how do we even get there? How did the air we all breathe become a threat? To really get it, you have to understand the language that allowed it all to happen. Let's call it the vocabulary of neglect. It really all started with this one powerful and, pretty corrosive word, apathy. It's just a lack of interest, a lack of concern. And for a long, long time, most people were either unaware of or just plain apathetic about the damage being done. It was out of sight, out of mind. And here's why that's so important. Because public apathy, it creates this vacuum. It allows people in power to just ignore their most basic jobs without anyone calling them on it. When the people are quiet, doing nothing becomes the easiest thing to do. And that leads us right to our next word, derelict. It just means you're failing in your duty. And for decades, governments at pretty much every level were derelict in their duty to protect the air we breathe and the water we drink. Because here's the thing about neglecting your duty, the consequences are never small. They ripple out and they affect the health and the lives of everyone. But you know who they hit the hardest? The most vulnerable among us. The end result of all this neglect was real, measurable detriment. That just means damage, harm. And you can see it so clearly along a part of the Mississippi River they call Cancer Alley. Industrial pollution has caused these awful health crises, mostly for low-income communities. And at the very heart of that harm were substances that were, in a single word, toxic, poisonous. This is where things get really serious, where the damage can't be denied, and where it becomes a matter of life and death. But, and this is a big but, even in a world full of apathy and neglect, a few powerful voices can change everything. And right from this grim reality, champions started to emerge, people who just refused to stay silent. So, in 1962, this biologist, Rachel Carson, she publishes a book called Silent Spring. and it completely blew the lid off the harm being caused by chemical pesticides like DDT. The chemical industry, well, they came after her hard. They called her a hysterical woman, tried to completely discredit her, but her research was so meticulous, so scrupulous, that it was undeniable. Her voice broke through all that noise. And you can see the ripple effect right here. I mean, look at this timeline. Carson's book comes out in '62, and it directly fuels a movement. Just 8 years later, we have the first Earth Day, and Congress passes the huge Clean Air Act. The entire conversation had changed, all because of that one voice. What Rachel Carson really did was she managed to foster a new awareness. She helped a sense of environmental responsibility develop and grow in a place where, before, there was only apathy. And all that growing public concern, well, it created a powerful incentive. All of a sudden, lawmakers had a reason, a really clear demand from their voters, to finally get to work and pass laws to protect the environment. But this isn't just a story about the past. Let's fast forward to a modern and incredibly powerful example of how one person's stand can force massive change. Let's talk about the water crisis in Flint, Michigan. Back in 2015, the Walters family was living through an absolute nightmare. Can you imagine your twin boys breaking out in these painful, mysterious rashes? Your teenage daughter's hair falling out in clumps? One of your sons just stopping growing? This was their terrifying new reality. And their mother, Leanne Walters, a housewife, not a scientist, was the opposite of apathetic. She saw what was happening to her family, and when the officials kept telling her everything was fine, she simply refused to believe it. She refused to be ignored. She was driven by this incredible, fierce resolve of a mother. She stopped just deploring the situation, just complaining about it, and she started to act. She became a citizen scientist, spending countless hours researching water contamination, learning how to test it, and documenting every piece of evidence from her own kitchen tap. And her relentless work, eventually, with the help of the EPA, it uncovered the horrifying truth. A decision made to save money had switched the city's water source to the corrosive Flint River. And that water was eating away at the old pipes, leaching highly toxic lead directly into her family's home. Her stand blew the lid off a national scandal. So, what do these stories really teach us? Well, these show this fundamental shift from ignorance to responsibility. They remind us of our awakening covenant, that shared pact we all have with this planet. This really summarizes the whole journey, doesn't it? Over on the left, you have the vocabulary of neglect, the words that lead to crisis. And on the right, you have the words of our covenant, the language of action and of hope. It's really a choice between two different futures, and it's a choice we make every single day. And why does this matter so much? Because we are not alone here. We share this world with millions of other species. From all the living creatures to the inanimate stones and the rivers themselves, everything is connected in this rich, fragile, beautiful diversity of life. Which brings us to the most important question of all. What happens next? Because this isn't just history. It's a living story that we're all a part of. So as you think about the incredible diversity of life right where you live, what's your pledge? I want to leave you with a challenge. Use 3 words from our story today to write your own environmental promise. What will your 3 words be?
Thanks so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed today's show. If you did, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss an update. I'll see you in the next one.